Hey, you.
Your aid to the Karja Sundom in these times of strife is appreciated. That's the official response. I'd say... I can tell you've done the work by the look on your face.
Two of them got themselves killed. The other... welcome to fight to the end.
They would have found death with or without you. Taken others with them.
That's what I told myself.
Smart girl. Doubt we'll meet again, so... go in light.
I mean, I was fully expecting them to be, like, sympathetic, but it's just kind of, Aloy's like, I don't know, I feel really sad, and I'm getting a lot of, like,
My duty is to guard. I don't
Uncharted vibes about it, of just kind of, like, there's supposed to be kind of this somber reflection on human life, except for the fact that Aloy has killed, how many people? Human enemies. I have killed 260 people. And just kind of like, the first time that I saw like Aloy do one of her like attack executions, it was like, oh god, okay. She is just very adept at the art of murder. And like, you know, just kind of like, oh yeah, no, that's a thing, cool. Stabby stabby, here I go killing again. And like, that's fine. But like, it's always funny to me when you have a game where you kill an abundance of people, and then there's always the mission where it's just kind of like, oh, it's so sad when I'm forced to murder, and it's like, really, which one? Which murder was the one that put you over the threshold when you were like, you know what? I kind of feel bad. It was somewhere in like the 50s or 60s. It's just, it's very interesting when kind of the story, or like the attempt to do things or to bring gravitas to an aspect of the story kind of runs in opposition with kind of what the gameplay looked expensive that was. I hate to belabor the point, but like, you know, I just don't know if I can get used to murder. Flourish his spear before stabbing in the chest. Dealing with most enemies, and one for people they have a specific hatred for, like Aloy and the cultists that wrecked her village, killed her dad. That's one of those things that, like, I could see it be... Maybe style is not the way to put it. Because you could probably even say in the phrasing, though I'm sure that you didn't mean it this way, like, you can also see how that can go wrong super, super quickly. But I could definitely see the idea of, like, if there's a separate set of, like, animations or something for it, where it's just kind of like, oh, wow, she's, like... Basically, she's grieving when she takes these people out, essentially. Let's see. Probably be easier to avoid that by making it for specific individuals that wrong the protagonist rather than a whole enemy group. Yeah, it's... I've seen it before, definitely. I think that in order to kind of, like, get the gravitas out of that sort of thing, it also takes a kind of, like... Violence is treated very lightly in video games, and I even mean that in terms of something like The Last of Us, where it is graphic as fuck. In the sense that, like, it is a primary tool. It's kind of a tool of design that isn't really given up a lot of thought in most games. Like, it's just kind of like, yeah, murder is just kind of a thing you do in video games. I think in order for that sort of decision to have weight...
Get over here! She's coming!
But, yeah, the point that I was kind of trying to get to is also that, like, in order for something like that to have gravitas and not just be another set of animations and kind of easily dismissed, I think that the story itself needs to treat the utilization of violence and lethal violence as something that is not, like, very either common or at least like each time you do it, it's significant. At least, and that's exactly it. And I mean, that's honestly one of my criticisms of like, you know, The Last of Us 2, apart like, and many different ways that have already been criticized with the way that they treated the dev team. One of those things is having people watch tremendously traumatizing footage in order to like accurately get the physics of someone's skull being shattered by a bullet correct.
Still sniffing around.
Which is kind of messed up. But yeah, it's pretty much the... Currently, violence is so commonplace as a tool in video games that the only way to make it noticeable is to make it very gratuitous. I shouldn't say only, but like, people have kind of become so inured to a tremendous degree of violence that they won't notice it unless it's especially intense. Now, there are other ways to get around that, and that's just kind of, you know, more game design type talk, but that definitely requires entirely orienting your game loop and your game design process to not have violence be a central and commonplace enough tool that like you can just get used to it and have it like just not notice it anymore. Which you can absolutely do, and I think is a worthwhile endeavor to do. But I think that there's been kind of this half-hearted kind of like pseudo artistic vision where people are like, oh no, we're gonna see the actual like consequences of violence. But like, it feels... Do you remember when Zack Snyder's Watchmen first came out? And Zack Snyder was saying, I'm gonna make a comic book movie for adults. And it came out, and it was like really violent and blood spurting, and there was a whole bunch of like, you know, just blood and like, you know, full frontal sex scenes and things like that. And it was just kind of like, is this for adults? And it's like, nah, not really. It's actually more like for a teen. Like, it's very just titillating. And just kind of this question of what like a mature story is in a game seems to still be very juvenile. And just kind of like, you know, this isn't your dad's video game, and it's just kind of like, okay, but you're still trying to do this weird sort of look how far we can push the envelope, but look how far we can push the envelope is still like magnitude of using the same tools. You know what I mean? So when they kind of decide to not do that, is when I'm impressed, which is, you know, not to say like I'm having a really great time playing this game and I'm not opposed to combat or violence or something. It's just like,
this is useful.
when you frame it as a storytelling tool, it's different than when you have to have it as just kind of a gameplay loop, in the sense that like this is a quick source of like satisfaction and dopamine for a player, and kind of it's a thing that happens while the story is going on. Like, I mean, the game that I can kind of think of that did that, which is praised by a lot of people, is Spec Ops: The Line, which, you know, did a lot of those sorts of like, okay, it starts out as the usual kind of military shit. Oh, buddy. Oh, you are going to be real lonely because you are the only one left. But then it like kind of let you get entrenched into that kind of like, oh yeah, no, we're just a bunch of badass like Navy SEALs or whatever. I don't actually remember like the Army unit or type that they were. And then it's just like, oh wait, this shit is horrific and should be treated as such. Oh. Yeah, it didn't end well for you. Metal Gear Solid had a great framing of violence, and the less you see and had to fight, the better a score you got. Of course, Kojima's not the auteur thinks he is, and watching way too many action movies, so there are parts that went against that. Well, and like... And this is a very kind of difficult thing when it comes to directing players to kind of and it's a very like psychology and like a very black box problem, because you can try and incentivize players to play in a certain way, and the way in which they play is intended to facilitate a certain emotional experience. But those two things are also separate. So in hearing that, at least for me, the idea of like, okay, if you kill fewer people and you're seen less, you get a better score, is like, well, okay, but the way in which you're still engaging with the game is via, like, you know, a numerical metric. It's not kind of considering the nature of the actions, it's just like, okay, but this is just kind of, this is what I do to, it's arithmetic. And you know, Metal Gear Solid is not the only game to do that, but it's this weird trick of like, trying to, it's like Inception basically, is trying to get this, letting the player come to kind of that emotional experience themselves, rather than like, you know, any number of games where you get the quote bad ending and the game lectures you about just like, you're a bad man, you killed all of those people. It's like, yeah, but you gave me points for killing all of those people, so, and all of the tools that you gave me were for killing people, so kind of the Undertale is actually a really great example, because like, you know, everyone starts out the freaking genocide run of Undertale, be like, yeah, we're gonna do this, I'm just gonna be a bad person, and everyone at the end of, like, as they go through the game is like, oh wait, all of these people are people, and their lives are like, as you take them, you are getting people asking you, why are you doing this? We didn't like this, and like, you know, acting like people who are being killed by you. And I think that is a good way of doing it, is just kind of humanizing it, because there's not like, you know, any kind of really easy way to kind of do it, and like, if someone is really that focused on not caring, then you're not going to convince them to care. But what you can do is take the aspects of, like, taking a life that are frequently overlooked by video games and trivialized by video games, and go, no, you don't get to avoid this. So you can do that, but you are going to have to listen to them ask you why you're killing them while you're doing it. And, like, if you're able to get through that and, like, not feel bad about it, then you are a harder person than me, and a harder person than most people, because, you know, in point of fact, in real life, killing people is hard and fucks you up emotionally. And like, there was a book that I read in high school called On Killing by I think is Colonel Grossman, and he goes through a number of the, basically the amount of trouble that the United States Army had to go through in order to, like, manufacture people's willingness to kill people in World War II. Because in World War I, it was just like, 1 in every maybe 10, like, bullets actually got shot at a person. Because people would pretend to shoot, but then shoot away. They would simply just, like, throw down their guns and not do it, and just kind of, like, all of those sorts of things. And so, just kind of the conditioning that the Army uses now. Can I not lock onto you? Yeah, cultist heavy. Could I... Sir? It took a lot. Like, it took a lot to get people to be willing to take and able to take the life of their fellow human being. And so kind of like providing that emotional distance is kind of what a lot of that, and like kind of dehumanizing is what those programs were able to do. And kind of, you know, there was, and this is a book that was written in like the mid to late 90s. So one of the things that he comes to at the end of it is just kind of like, so video games are like teaching our kids to kill. And it's like, well, okay, but a lot of those studies have shown that that's not actually the case. Video games don't have a link to, like, increased instances of, like, physical violence. Or at least the presence of violence in video games does not have a recordable, research-proven link to instances of violence in real life. Here we go. That being said, you can absolutely see the relationship of just kind of numbing someone to kind of the at least the idea of, like, violence that comes from just kind of doing it over and over and over and over again. It's repetition. So in circling back to our original topic of, like, using violence as a prescient storytelling tool that
got us a corpse over here.
That, like, heavily influences someone and like shapes them.
Not long. Watch out.
Alright, shut up. Asshole. Going back to our original topic, you have to kind of reverse a lot of that conditioning and the desensitization to things like violence that have largely become normalized. And you can do that, but it is a significant restructuring of commonly used video game narrative structure.